In this year's study that we did with the Ponemon Institute, we really wanted to look at the endpoint environment and the endpoint landscape, and in particular, how that landscape was being impacted by forces that we saw. And the forces that we really see impacting that environment, one is what we've been terming the new threat landscape. The other area is sort of a term that's been trendy within the industry, but we definitely see a impact there, and that's the consumerization of IT. And then the third area is in the area of compliance and that growing burden that organizations are under to meet compliance requirements. Now, of course, all of this is really steeped in the context of efficiency and cost cutting as a result of the economic climate that we currently find ourselves in. And so ultimately what we wanted to do was to learn about how are these forces impacting both IT operations and IT security, and what these two areas are doing to address these challenges and the overall impact to that endpoint management landscape. There were a lot of really interesting insights. I think sort of at the high level, the one insight that we found is that the endpoint environment is a very complex environment. There are a lot of point technologies, and organizations are having a difficult time in bringing these technologies together, because one of the challenges that we found from the study is that IT security, IT operations are still having a challenging time working together, sharing the information that they have across various workflows, and as a result of all of these point technologies, there's a lot of disparate data. So bringing this together and integrating this is not only a challenge, but also is a primary goal, because organizations have to cut costs. The more integration that an organization has across these point solutions, the more cost that they're going to have with that. But I think more importantly is that if they don't improve the visibility across IT ops and IT security, they're going to continue to have a harder time really managing that security environment. I think there are a lot of different forces. I think one is this notion of the consumerization of IT. We definitely are seeing that. I believe 44% of the organizations said that they were either putting into place now or were planning to put into place a employee subsidized laptop program. And the result of that is it can save a lot of cost. I think Gartner said that you could reduce your TCO by 44% and also improve your end user satisfaction. So we see that. We also found some other interesting insights where a significant number of organizations were allowing employees to bring personal devices, iPods, PDAs, even laptops, plugging that into the network, and yet only about 25% of these organizations had a policy addressing that. And so what we're seeing is that a lot of these end-user devices are being plugged in. Companies are looking to expand on these employee-subsidized programs, and consequently, there's very little policy in how the organizations should address that. So while we're getting the benefit from a cost standpoint, we are inherently potentially bringing in new risk into our endpoint environment as a result of that. I think we asked one of the questions: what technologies do you have in place today, and what technologies do you see yourself putting into place in the next 12 to 24 months? And when you looked at this, what immediately stood out was this drive for efficiency. I mean, we saw a lot of intent to put into place, software license metering, power management. These were all areas that, again, how do I take TCO out? We also saw a tremendous amount of planned intent around cloud computing, virtualization, Web 2.0. And I think in that context, while we can expect to see increased usage, in fact, I would predict that we would see a more rapid adoption of those because of the cost efficiencies that can be gained. But in those areas, in a specific way, they could be introducing more risk into that endpoint management landscape. And so consequently, if you're under budgetary pressure, or you don't have enough resources, or you don't have the skilled people that you need to address those new levels of a risk, while you may be reducing cost, you're actually bringing more risk into your endpoint environment. in last year's study that we did on the megatrends, we like to look at the differences between IT operations roles and IT security roles, and we wanted to take that same perspective into this year's study. And what we found is that on average, about half of all organizations are saying that the collaboration is adequate, but it could be improved. What's interesting is that a third of all companies said that the collaboration was poor or non-existent. And that's important because if the organization is looking to bring in new types of approaches to reduce costs like cloud computing and virtualization and new types of technologies, you really need to have those two areas working together. And when we asked, what were some of the most important risks that companies were looking out in the next 12 months, what was really surprising is that IT ops folks said that the integration of technology was a big risk. And this sort of informs us that, the lack of visibility across workflows, disparate data as a result of all these point technologies is, really impacting the organization's ability to share information, to collaborate between these two areas. And if they're able to make progress in that, not only do we feel that you'll have better efficiency, but you'll also be much more effective at protecting your endpoint environment. Those international breakouts, I think, were some of the more interesting aspects of the study. What was really interesting is when we looked at the U.S. market in comparison to other markets. In general, the U.S. market felt that their C-level support was really not there, that their companies were not placing the protection of information as a major strategic initiative. U.S. organizations also felt that the collaboration between IT ops and IT security was non-existent or very poor. And then we also saw where a lot of U.S. companies really felt that they did not have the budgetary resources to meet these new and emerging threats as the organizations are looking to cut costs. So in the U.S. marketplace, it seems like it's going to be very challenging as we head into 2010 and into 2011. And I also expect the U.S. market to sort of lead the adoption of some of these new areas like virtualization, like cloud computing. Yet if we have that disconnect between the C-suite, between budgetary resources, and we don't have the strong collaboration between IT security and IT ops, I think it's going to be a very challenging environment for U.S. companies as they move into the next 12 to 24 months. We asked questions along those lines, and what was really interesting is that both from IT security and IT operations was insider risk. This was really the number one risk I identified for the next 12 to 24 months. And I think that's a result of the economic environment that we find ourselves in. I think the Ponemon Institute did another study where they asked employees if they were leaving a company, would they take any sensitive information, and 60% said that they would. So I think that this reality is definitely one of the major risks that are recognized by the respondents within the study. Now, adding on to that was really this notion of a lack of skilled personnel, and I thought that was very interesting, in that both IT ops and IT security professionals really addressed that one of the risks that they have is this inability to get knowledgeable or skilled people to come in and sort of address these new environments and these new challenges. IT operations also noted that the lack of integration between technologies and point solutions was also a very large risk from their perspective. So a couple of really interesting insights were starting to come up as a result of that.